Hello, my beautiful students. This is going to be a quick review of things you need to know for the test over how we created the Constitution. The first term that you must know for the test is republic. You say it every day in the Pledge of Allegiance to the republic for which it stands, and it's where we choose the people that govern us. So you go to the polls when you get old enough and you choose the people that you want to make decisions for you. Whether or not that works out in your favor, well, that's kind of iffy, but you do get the opportunity to choose, and that's why we are special in our country for that. The second term you need to remember for the test is the Northwest Territory. This is the land that we received after the Revolutionary War, that we were given with that treaty that we set up with England. It was divided into sections or states, and we organized it in an orderly fashion for the growth of the nation. So this highlighted area, right in here, if you can see that, is the area that we're talking about that we received. Now, since we got all that new land, that new territory, we decided we should probably divide it up in an orderly fashion, and that's called the Northwest Ordinance. And that says when we have so many people, which was 5,000 free males in an area, that each man who owned at least 50 acres of land, and when there's 60,000 people total, that area could apply to become a state. And we set up that pattern so that all of our states followed that same pattern basically until today. Although we don't have any new states and haven't for a while, since Hawaii and Alaska. Here's what it looks like to jog your memory when it's sectioned out. It's in that grid-like pattern. You can see the section boundaries and then sections within sections. So these are the new states that we got out of the Northwest Territory. And this is how they developed over the years. So as they received that population and the area, they applied to become states, which led to all those states that we have today. Illinois is super close to us. Our next term is the Constitutional Convention. This is where delegates met in Philadelphia to draft a version of the Constitution. So this is the outside. Obviously it's a painting, not a real picture. On the inside of the State House today, if you go visit today, what it looks like. There were 74 delegates asked to come to Philadelphia. Only 55, for various reasons, decided to show up and help draft. One of our notable ones, Mrs. Guerin's favorite, Alexander Hamilton, was there. Here's a nice painting to help you jog your memory of the Constitutional Convention. While at the convention, there were three major compromises that the men had to come up with in order to create our Constitution. The first one is the Great Compromise. Now, with the Great Compromise, there were two schools of thought. The first one was the Virginia Plan. This is a plan by the large states where it said that we wanted to have two houses. It would be like the House and Senate today, but both of the houses would be assigned based on a state's wealth, which is money, or population. The small states didn't like that. They proposed their own plan. That's a New Jersey plan. They only wanted to have one house, and they thought it should all be equal, so each state would only get one vote. They settled and came up with what's known as the Great Compromise. The Great Compromise said that we're going to have two houses, just like we have today, the House and the Senate, and that the Senate is going to be equal. Each state, no matter if it's Missouri, California, Alaska, every state gets two senators. So Missouri gets two, Illinois gets two, Ohio gets two. In the Senate, it's all equal, so we have 100 senators total. The House is figured differently. The House is based on a state's population. So the largest states, the most populous state like California, gets 52 votes, but a small state, now remember not size but population like Wyoming, would only get one vote. And that makes up what we consider Congress today. So remember, if you hear something on TV and they're referring to Congress, they're talking about the House and Senate combined, which would be 535 people. That would be 100 in the Senate and 435 in the House. This is the total number today. Now, this is based on the census, so at any given time, we could have more or less representatives depending on how the population has shifted. And actually, I'm pretty sure Missouri, we have 9 or 10 instead of 11 due to the last census at this point. The other main compromise was the 3/5 compromise. This went over the topic of slavery. So in the South, they thought they should be counted for population so they could have more representatives in Congress, but the northern states didn't like that. The North said, okay, you can count them for taxation, but not for voting rights. And the South said, no, we want to count them for voting rights, but not taxation. And so they came up with a compromise that slaves would be counted as 3/5 of a person for both taxation and voting in Congress. This is written into the Constitution that slaves count as 3/5 of a person. They're not considered a whole person. Now, granted, today we have passed laws that this outdates and this no longer applies. But it is kind of sad to know that in the wording in our Constitution that slaves are counted as only 3/5 of a person. Our last two review vocabulary words today are Federalist and Anti-Federalist. Federalists are the group of people that wanted to pass the Constitution the way it was. They were excited for the Constitution, they thought it was great, that it didn't need many changes, and they wanted to pass it without any improvements being made. So they thought everyone should rush out and vote for it. On the flip side, you have a group of Anti-Federalist. They thought there was still some work to do on the Constitution. Mainly, they wanted a Bill of Rights. And so they wanted those guaranteed freedoms that, should apply to the states. They thought the national government shouldn't have as many powers that was listed. They wanted the legislative branch to have more power. They didn't want one single person in charge of the executive branch. So both sides went back and forth. They published a series of essays called the Federalist Papers. Once again, Mrs. Guerin's favorite, Alexander Hamilton, was one of the main writers of the Federalist Papers in order to encourage everyone to pass the Constitution. The only way they finally got it passed was by agreeing that it needed a Bill of Rights. Bill of Rights is the first 10 amendments of the Constitution. It lists all those things like freedom of press and speech and the right to bear arms that you guys know and love today.